And good evening, everyone. And who would have thought just 3 days ago, where must I say the Mariners were 6-10, the negativity, Twitter was a very dangerous place to be unless you're in my live streams where you can say whatever you want. But man, they were 6-10. Julio was refusing interviews. One fan was like, he's now flirting with Jen Mueller or something and making jokes or something. Who knows? It got pretty bad. And now, 3 days later, the Mariners swept the Cincinnati Reds, who are 9-6, and Mariners are one game back from the division. Now, before we get started, and before I have this special question, Trident, it's been a long time. How have you been? I know your scheduling has just been very erratic. We switched places because last year I was the one complaining about not being able to make time for my shows, and now it's like we traded spots.
Yeah, I mean, everything's going great. It's just been that I don't have last year, with my job, I was able to be like, all right, I'm out at 1. I'm going to go watch the Mariners game. You guys hold down the fort. Don't quite have that luxury this year. So it's been tough for me to do the live streams and do and do that. But it is still good to talk Mariners. I'm still doing my daily show and everything. So still producing the content. But it's good to be back on here and talk some Mariners, and it's nice to do it after a real positive series for the team too.
Yeah, absolutely. Because just 3 days ago, it was to a point where when Monday happened and I happened to have the softball game, the game wouldn't get rained out because it got rained out the week before. And knowing that I got the game, I was like, you know what? I could use a day away from doing a live show. I could use the break, which it was really nice. And now Trident, I have the question. So despite the very shaky start on the offense, Julio is not being Julio. I mean, he's April Julio that we are all used to now. JP isn't exactly living up to expectations. Mitch Garver has pretty much been, until today, pretty much a liability. Cal Raleigh is meh. Canzone's hurt now. Polanco has been streaky, to say the least. And Mariners are one game back from the division, 9-10. If this were to happen, if I were to tell you that this were to happen even 3 days ago, would you think I'm crazy?
That the Mariners would come in and sweep Cincinnati, or is that what you like?
Or just the fact of the situation where they're having a really bad offensive start and they're still within Texas's area code?
It's tough because they were probably fortunate when they were 6-10. I was kind of talking on my channel and everything. They're probably fortunate to be 6-10. They have played worse than that. It's not like they were losing a bunch of 1-run games and we could just go, oh, Brash is coming back, Santos is coming back, it'll be fine. They were getting beat up pretty good. Now, like I said, they were fortunate that they came back against Boston, won that extra inning game. They were fortunate they held on to the 1-0 win against Boston, held on to that game in Milwaukee that they won, and then pulled it out in Toronto in the extra innings, thanks to a nice catch by Polanco in the 9th inning. But since then, the last 7 games, they're 5-2. Overall, the offensive numbers aren't great, but they're starting to come back a little bit. Their numbers are starting to go up. Guys starting to drive the ball a little bit, getting on base. Still kind of, I said it yesterday, kind of missing that big hit into the gap to kind of open some of these games up. But the offense looks much better the last week. So with all that in mind, I'm not shocked at where they're at. But yeah, the offensive numbers have probably warranted a worse record than 9-10. But in the last week, I think they have legitimately looked good.
And I think we can say, before we are going to go over the agenda, we can say that some things that have been surprising, the bullpen has been able to somewhat hold up. And I believe when I looked up their numbers, and actually I might as well look it up now, but last time I looked up their numbers, they were actually top 10 in the bullpen. And this is without Matt Brash, without Santos. And they're still this bullpen that they have right now, they're still able to step up and do the job. And it's something that I was really not expecting. I thought this would be maybe worst case, a bottom 10. I know maybe that's extreme, but definitely more in the way middle of the pack. But there were, it's you don't really know. I don't really notice many games where they actually where you can say the bullpen actually choked it away. It was really just that Andres Munoz game where he came in a very difficult situation against Milwaukee, where he pretty much walked the entire thing. Aside from that, the bullpen has been able to pretty much keep it together, considering that. And I got the stats. They're actually sixth. They're the sixth best bullpen in baseball without Brash and Santos. I could only imagine what that bullpen is going to be like if they were to come back and be healthy. That would be a pretty lethal bullpen that I don't want to really explain much because it terrifies me in a good way to see Matt Brash and Santos back someday.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because it's almost, I don't know what the word catch 22 or something, how we describe it. But, when the team was struggling, I couldn't just sit there and go, well, Brash and Santos are coming back because the bullpen, like you said, has actually been pretty solid. It hasn't, and the one game they kind of blew in Milwaukee, I don't think Brash and Santos changed anything there because Munoz might have pitched in that game anyways. You know what I mean? So that really wasn't a Brash Santos situation. So it was hard to, getting those guys back is going to help because eventually the bullpen is going to be needed, very, very, relied upon. But yeah, the bullpens, it's funny that the things that have worked out for this team so far, like the third base platoon has actually been all right. I mean, Urias could probably be a little better, but overall, Rojas has been great. Third base has been okay. I'm not justifying the Geno trade and saying I love it or anything, but they've been all right. The bullpen has held up pretty well. So some of the things we had question marks of coming into the year have actually played out okay. It's kind of the superstars, if for lack of a better term, or the superstars and then the stars that have struggled for this team. Now, we're coming off a great sweep against the Reds, so things are looking up, but just for the overall picture, that's really been where the struggles have come from.
Yeah, and it's kind of ironic because when the season started, before the season started, we were expecting the bullpen and the third base to be where the problems were going to be, but and like Julio and like JP and the core, where they were going to take it to like whichever level we would like, and like Julio was talking that big game about wanting to be that MVP, but it seems that everything is flipped where the stuff we thought were going to be bad actually has turned out good, and the stuff that we were expecting to be good has turned out bad. So it's kind of flip flop. But honestly, I think I'd rather have that problem because we would expect that any of those core players would actually get it going. Because if all of them batted at least 200, I think the Mariners actually lead the division in a much more convincing fashion because much of our players are batting below 200, and I am not going to expect everyone to be batting below 200 by even the All-Star break. I would not even anticipate that. But we're going to go over what the agenda is going to be. And before we even get started, rather than use my promo code because a lot of people have been using mine, I'm actually going to switch it to J Trident Podcast. So J Trident for $20 off for SeatGeek. So
Thank you.
use
Appreciate it.
his as he would like to, I don't know, fund his new camera if he needs it, or maybe more background stuff, or just anything to reinvest into the channel. But what we're gonna go over is the Red Series, which was absolutely amazing and impressive. We're gonna go over the goods so far, which we kind of did, but we'll go over it much more further. The bad and things to look forward to, or maybe things that we fear or are concerned about. And we will do this we'll try to keep this show in under an hour because I still got to post my own post game video, which I'm just as committed as Trident is to put out a video. Like, even if both of us are like, if Trident's stuck in a desert somewhere in Arizona and I'm stuck somewhere in the middle of nowhere myself, we're still going to find a way to post these videos because we want to keep our fans connected and up to date about Mariners baseball, because not everyone wants to watch Root Sports because we already know what they're going to say. They're going to say, oh, they had a bad game, but they can get better. Nah, we say the truth. So the Red Series, Mariners with a very impressive sweep. Things I can reflect from that, Jonathan Clase, he came in and made immediate impact. Sure, the numbers don't really exactly explain, but numbers lie. And whenever he got those hits or those RBIs, that's when it actually mattered. And that was the difference between him and Canzone. Like when Canzone hit those home runs, they pretty much didn't matter. Like they were pretty much on garbage time. But Clase has really made an instant impact already. He's pretty solid on defense. He steals the bases. And the entire starting pitching core did very well as well. I think it was George Kirby who pitched well. Logan Gilbert was just absolutely lights out. And Bryce Miller pitched a one-hitter. And the bullpen still, even without the Brash and Santos, they still gave up no hits and struck out 5 in those 3 innings and tried anything of takeaway from that impressive Red series that it was more like that's a more like it thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I would sum it up. That's when I've said I think this team is going to win the division, and maybe, and listen, if you think the team can win the division, you obviously think they can compete for a World Series. So when I've said that, this is the team I expected to see. Now, I don't expect them to sweep every single series rest of the year, but the way they played, like the offense doing enough, hitting some home runs, drawing some walks, base hits here and there, wearing down the starting pitching a little bit. And then the Mariners starting pitching being lights out, bullpen being lights out. Now, I expected that with Brash and Santos, not so much Austin Voth and Trent Thornton, but they did the job today. And to your point too, with Clase, some timely hitting, which was key. And I think the defense is another big boost. When you've got, and nothing that I like Dominic Canzone and I love Mitch Haniger, but when you have Canzone, Julio, and Haniger out there, that's not a great outfield defense. Julio's amazing. Haniger's fundamentally sound, but Clase, Julio, and Luke Raley and Haniger DHing and stuff, you're running out a really, really good defensive outfield that's going to track down some fly balls for you. So I think having Clase out there has been a big boost. His at-bats have looked good. Like I get the numbers aren't like off the charts for 3 games, but he looks the part. He looks like a major league player. Good approach at the plate. He's going to swing and miss. Like it's just in his game. He's going to strike out. But overall, he looks solid.
A few things that I've noticed too was the offense. They looked a lot more patient than they did in Chicago and series before. Like before the Red series, they were just swinging like everything at will. And I remember I was asking anyone if there was a statistic on how many check swings the Mariners performed, because there were so many check swings on even the pitches they didn't have to do. And it just drove me insane. And well, that's what doing live shows for 10 days straight will do to me, is watching them do so many check swings. And there was just so many times it was just unnecessary. But for this series, they actually did a lot better this time. And we saw guys like Julio and JP, they actually did a little bit better this week. And when you got Julio and JP at least playing average, that's where you're going to win the series, or you're going to sweep the series. Because when the Mariners were not winning series, that's when Julio and JP just were not there. Like they just weren't there. But luckily, they stepped up this time and did very well. And it seemed that maybe Julio got that. He wanted to just tear off that embarrassment of getting thrown out at first base when he was the pinch runner. So maybe that had something to do with it. And if any other things I can reflect throughout this series, we finally got to see Mitch Garver hit a home run. Finally, like after giving him that, we saved all that money from trading away Eugenio Suarez and Jared Kelenic, really Evan White and Marco Gonzalez. Mitch Garver finally makes his value. And even before the home run, at least he was drawing walks. He drew hit by pitches. He hit a couple doubles. So it's not like he's Cooper Hummel and Tommy LaStella level bad, but we would like to see him do a lot better than what he is. But at least we can say for this series, he certainly contributed a little bit more this time.
Yeah, and like, did Julio set the world on fire this series? No, but he reached base twice each game. Good to see a couple extra base hits today. Those are his first 2 extra base hits since opening day. Like you said, Mitch Garver drew some walks. Finally get to see a little bit of the pop today in the bat. JP reached base a few times. So, Jorge Polanco's been swinging the bat really well the last couple weeks today, notwithstanding struggled today. But like I said, you are seeing a little bit of a turnaround, and the thing is, listen, like Julio's not going to OPS 470 this season. I said in my video all the time, even if like you're down on some of these players, even if you think JP might regress or Mitch Garver wasn't a good signing or anything like that, that's all fine. I'll hear that out, but they're not this bad. You know what I mean? They're going to come out of this a little bit, at the very, very least. You know what I mean? So it was good to see them. It just, the last week they've looked good. That they've had better at bats. Even yesterday when they won 3-1, like I said in my channel, I thought they actually had a pretty good offensive game. They got Hunter Green out after 4 innings, threw 100 pitches, a lot of strikeouts, but Hunter Green's going to do that to you. And they got on base. They just didn't get that big hit yesterday, like that ball in the gap that opened up the game. But even then, I thought their approach was better. In the first couple weeks of the season, I mean, you go to the bathroom and you're coming back out after 10 seconds and the inning was over. They were just going down 1, 2, 3, like nobody's business. So now they're starting to get on base a little bit, starting to deliver some hits, 2 home runs today. It's coming around. The offense is coming around.
It's really good to see because, I mean, and I know that there's a lot of like doom and gloom from Mariners fans, which again, I'm not going to block anyone if throughout my chats, I saw a lot of people with doom and gloom comments. Like, they're actually hilarious to look at, but it's like, I'm not going to delete someone's comments if they want to vent about it. And for both of our channels, we make that clear that you can say whatever you want. Now just don't send a little bunch of spamming stuff and like that has nothing to do with baseball. As long as you're not doing that, you're okay. Like, even if you say Rooftop or Trident, your takes are horrible, you suck, fine. You should feel like you should say that, because if you feel that way, then maybe we'll try to improve from that. And I have personally seen some comments where they're like, hey, that's quite a bit of SeatGeek ads you put there. And I actually took that into consideration. So I do my best to listen to my fans and see what they want. Even if a guy says no more push-ups, fine. But I'll just lose the exercise, but that's fine. So I think that's as much as we were going to go about the Red series. Is there anything else that you may have noticed that really stood out? I mean, Julio's defense when he threw out De La Cruz, which that was a lot more valuable than we would have thought, because when I saw that play, I first thought Jake Fraley scored, but because Julio threw out the De La Cruz at third and Jake Fraley wasn't even crossing home yet, the run didn't count. So it was good to see Julio step up with defense, and his defense was fantastic throughout this entire series, as I must say. That's another thing that stood out in this series.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, that defense alone yesterday was worth, an 0 for 4. I know Julio wasn't 0 for 4 yesterday, but, you could stomach it when you're getting that defense like that. Yeah, that play was crazy. And I didn't even bring it up in my post. I brought up that play, and I know we all kind of bagged on Jake Fraley a little bit there. I don't know why Ellie De La Cruz was going to third on that play. I mean, I know the guy's got wheels, but there's 2 outs. So getting to third, I mean, obviously you're more likely to score from third than second, but it wasn't that big of a deal as, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know why he just didn't stay at second there, because he's going to score on any base hit for the most part from the next batter anyways. So, that was kind of a bizarre. The Reds kind of marinered the game yesterday.
I mean, we'll take it because because I thought after the one thing, I'm probably the only Mariner fan that brought it up. I actually thought Scott Service pulling Logan Gilbert after that walk, I think it was a little bit of a knee-jerk kind of move. I know that he was probably planning to pull him out after he was going to be pulled out after that 7th inning, fine. But I thought after one walk, I was like, I don't think it was that necessary, because he wasn't even the 100. It was just one bat at that. Because before that, Logan was dealing, and I just didn't think it was necessary putting in Munoz in that situation, and it nearly imploded. But luckily, a great Julio defense and a boneheaded move by De La Cruz kind of bailed them out. So that's what I was concerned about. So if I had a nitpicker, I would have been like, I would have liked to see Logan just at least finish that inning, because that's what Service tends to do. Whenever someone gets on base, Service immediately goes to the bullpen to close them out. Now, if he was like over 100 pitches, fine, because by 100 pitches, especially with the way pitchers are throwing these days, then that makes sense. And I actually just learned that last week. Urinating Tree came up with a really fantastic video where, because I remember I'm one of those boomer fans that go, well, back in the old days in the 90s, they pitched 150 pitches with no problems. But I didn't realize that pitchers are throwing with a lot more spin. Like now their fastballs are like spinning in weird circles. And those actually do put more wear and tear. I didn't realize it. Now it makes sense why there's so much Tommy John. I first thought that Tommy John was more of a thing because maybe not pitching as much, their arms aren't as conditioned, but no, it's because of how they're throwing it. Like you see our pitchers, they're throwing like very bizarre like fastballs. Their fastballs are spinning. They kind of look like really light speed screwballs.
Yeah.
Like if you look at clips in the 90s, they're like straight there, maybe like some breaking stuff. If we saw a 100-mile-an-hour fastball, that would be like on ESPN's top 10 plays. But now that everyone's throwing hundreds, now it's understandable why pitch count's a thing. But I still think Logan should have finished that inning. But that's just me. But it didn't matter anymore because luckily Julio's defense and De La Cruz's ego bailed out the Mariners in that inning.
One thing I will say, like, I didn't mind Scott taking out Logan. If you go back and watch, he actually gave up some pretty hard hit outs. Spencer Steer had that line drive. India had one into the gap that Julio raced and caught down. So I didn't mind that. I will say and I have no problem going to Munoz earlier than the ninth to go at the heart of the order, but that was actually kind of the bottom of the order. Now, De La Cruz is great, but I would have gone to a lefty there. I think Spire might not have been available. I think I would have gone to Sauce there.
The Sauce,
And
she was eventually used anyway.
And then you have Stanek pitch the 8th to the bottom of the order, and then Munoz in the 9th is, I think, the better way. I mean, listen, it ended up working out, you know what I mean? But yeah. I do think it was a little, I didn't mind taking Logan out. I would have been fine if, again, Scott would have left him in to face De La Cruz. I would have understood, but I didn't have a problem with him coming out there. But it was a little, I think that was one where it was a little overthought. I do like the idea of Munoz pitching against like the heart of the order and then going to Stanek for the bottom of the order. I think that's totally reasonable. But yesterday it was a little bit like, Munoz against the number 6 hitter. And I get you want your best reliever against one of their best hitters, but the top of the order is going to come back around. So, I mean, it worked out, but not my favorite bullpen management ever.
And that's what we saw in the 9th inning. And I think after a couple games, I hate to say it, but I just don't know if Stanek is the closer. Now, he does have amazing stuff. Like he has like a near 100-mile-an-hour fastball thing, but he walks quite a bit. So that's what makes me a little bit nervous. And I know that Service is trying to figure out which one works better. Is it going to be Munoz? Is it going to be Stanek? But I think my bold prediction is, and after this bold prediction, we'll go to the goods, the bads, the uglies of this team so far. I will say that I think when Matt Brash and Santos are back, I think they're going to have like a 4-way, 3-way competition between all those guys to see which one can do it. I think maybe Santos will get a look for closer in the future. I would say Brash, but I think he's more of a middle to setup guy, just like Munoz is. And Munoz kind of proved it that he does pitch better in the 8th inning than he does in the 9th inning. Like we saw yesterday, after he settled down in the 7th, he was lights out in the 9th inning. Like it was actually really fun to watch. But I think once Service gets everyone in the bullpen healthy, I think that's when those tough decisions will be made. Or maybe it'll just be a closer by committee because Service does tend to do that sometimes when he doesn't know who his closer is, except with the exception of Paul Sewald, which he seemed to be the more established closer, at least until the Mariners traded him. So that's my thoughts on the bullpen, and I think we'll talk more about it once we get into it. So that is completely on the Reds portion. Great sweep. It was impressive. Offense stepped up. Pitching was fantastic. Starting pitching is exactly what we wanted to see. But now we will go to the positive parts of the team. So the good parts, and I guess we'll go back and forth. And Trident, considering the time that you have had not being able to join my shows or do your own live shows, I think I'll say you go ahead and tell me what's a good thing you liked about the Mariners so far this season?
Bryce Miller has probably been the biggest standout for me. Logan Gilbert as well. But Bryce looks legitimately really good. Now he started out really good last year, but primarily kind of a one pitch pitcher last year. He had that slider, but it was very much just a pitch that was sort of like, here, I don't just throw fastballs. Here's this pitch. Now he's got a legitimate splitter. The slider looks like it's got more bite. Maybe I'm just getting hyped. And then the fastball command has been fantastic. And Bryce Miller's a guy I was a little bit concerned about. Not that I thought he was bad or anything, but if you go look at his Savant page from last year, it wasn't great. Tailed off a little bit in the second half. I was just a little bit worried about him. And 5 starts doesn't make you go, okay, no concern, but he absolutely looks like he's kind of putting himself into, we talk about Castillo, Gilbert, Kirby as kind of the big 3. Miller, this is your big 3 here. Miller's kind of getting close to being in there for me. As someone that was actually a bigger Brian Wu fan than Bryce Miller, and Wu could still be great. We'll see him hopefully in a few weeks. But Bryce Miller looks, you can make case so far he's your Cy Young winner in the American League. Every team, but yeah.
Look at his numbers. He's 3-1 with a 1.85 ERA. He pitched a 1-hitter, 24 strikeouts, been very efficient. And I am looking at the Baseball Savant page. Last season, his fastball was 58% of the time, 19% was sliders, 8% sweeper, barely pitched the sinker. He barely even pitched a changeup, which makes sense why towards the end of the season, he became a lot more predictable, which is why he struggled throughout most of the season. And if we remember, he had that blister in the Tampa game, and I think it was the fact that he was just throwing so many fastballs and just not mixing it up, which I think did lead to him having some injury problems. But now looking at this season for 2024, 41% he's pitching the fastball, 20% is the split finger. And last year, he didn't even have a split finger. So it was good that he was able to work on that. 20% sinker, 12% slider, and 8% the sweeper. So it's a huge difference, and it's good to see that Bryce Miller has really stepped up and pitched very well for this team. So I do like the Bryce Miller, that he has been one of the high points of the team. Now, I will go over one of my favorite parts is, I would say bullpen, but I talk about bullpen. I think we've talked about enough bullpen that they have held up pretty well. I already talked about the fact that they're a top 10 bullpen in baseball without Brash and Santos. So I think at that point, we're just kicking a dead horse. But I'm going to say the third base combo of Luis Urias and Josh Rojas. And Josh Rojas has easily been one of our more consistent players on the team. And Luis Urias, his batting average isn't really showing it. Yes, his on-base percentage is at 296, but at least he had some big hits, had a big home run, had some doubles. He even got hit by the pitch, and he took it with the bases loaded. And if I actually looked up their WAR, wins above replacement, between them and Eugenio Suarez, I'll take a look at Eugenio Suarez for this season. He has a 0.3 wins above replacement. And then when I went to the value of the hitters for between Urias and Josh Rojas, they're both at 0.2. So if you combine both of them, both of them as a combo, they're actually arguably more valuable than Eugenio Suarez. Now, of course, Suarez is still the better baseball player, but it's still refreshing, and it's still good to see that they both have been doing good. Rojas, I think, has exceeded expectations. Like, it was more than what I was expecting. At least Urias, at least he's somewhat met expectations. I think it was what I was expecting, considering that there was a lot of concerns at third base. We didn't know if Rojas could play third base. And the fact that Urias showed up out of shape in spring training was what got us concerned, which is why I was concerned going to third base. But now, the one thing I never doubted Rojas was the guy's talented. He's very athletic. I remember last year when I saw Cal Raleigh throw out a runner at second base in Oakland, Rojas made a jumping tag. So the athleticism is absolutely there for defense. So hopefully the third base can only go forward, and hopefully that both of them will be healthy, including Urias, and hopefully they keep it going. Now, do I expect Rojas to maintain well above 300? Probably not. But if he can at least be consistent, go around at least somewhere in like the high twos, I'll take it.
Yeah, I mean, and especially as the left-handed bat in a platoon, just do what you did last year. And Rojas came over here and he gave the team a nice boost at second base after the Colton Wong disaster. Rojas is a pretty solid player. And he's got a little pop too in the bat. Hits the home run today as well. Listen, my beef with Gino was never so much trading Gino. I think you could justify trading him. It was just the fact that it was pretty much a pure salary dump trade. That's what was frustrating to me about it. Like, I didn't mind moving on from Gino. It was just they did it because it's John Stanton and the ownership group. The only way to get like a Mitch Garver in here was to shed money from other players. You know what I mean? That's what was frustrating. I don't mind what they did. I just would have liked maybe a little more return on that. And if you're willing to eat some of that money, you probably can get a little bit better return. But, the Mariners get Sebi Zavala, who again, God bless him, but doesn't look very good. And then Carlos Vargas, who I like, nice live arm, but you got to find the strike zone. So, that's, and same thing, like, I'm not, hashing all of it, but that's really been my issue there. I believe in this third base platoon to be decent. We'll see where it ends up at the end of the year. I don't, Rojas's numbers look great. I imagine he's probably got a pretty high BABIP going, so he might come down a little bit, but still a solid player. If you can get what you got last year from him, as that one side of the platoon, good shape.
And I even looked at the compare their strikeouts to walks. Rojas and Urias. If you add strikeouts, 17 strikeouts to 7 walks, and if you look at Eugenio Suarez, 19 strikeouts to 5 walks. So in terms of like strikeout to walks, at least the duo is doing a little bit better in terms of not striking out as much. So that's a good thing to see. Now, anything else? Any other goods that we've got for the team so far? You said Bryce Miller. I said third base. I think maybe if we have like maybe one or two more things that really stick out really well.
I mean, Canzone was coming on a little bit before the injury. He's starting to walk a little bit. The power's legit, but on the IL now. Jorge Polanco has been, today notwithstanding, has been red hot the last week, home runs and drawing walks. So, it looks like for now the Mariners are finally going to get some decent second base production after going through Adam Frazier, who we thought would be solid. That didn't work out. It's like, oh, we got an upgrade with Colton Wong, and that didn't work out. I think the Mariners finally have a good second base option in Josh Rojas. And the other positive I'll point out is this team's development of bullpen arms. They have done a great job with it. It's something that it just seems like everybody that comes in here finds success in the bullpen. Last year it was Topa, Sauce, and Spire. Before that, you had Penn Murphy, Paul Sewald, Eric Swanson, guys like that were either failed starters or cast-offs from other teams. And this year, Austin Voth looks pretty decent. Trent Thornton has been really good. Who else am I missing here in the bullpen? Bolton and Snyder both went on the injured list. Tyson Miller has looked decent. Brent DeGus looks all right. Like, I don't trust all these guys fully. Like, I'm not saying, oh, I want Brent DeGus to come in the 8th inning in Texas up 3-2 with the bases loaded, and I'm super confident. I still want Brash and Santos back. But, their continued development of some of these arms has been impressive. And honestly, for them to, hold on, missing Brash and Santos is huge. That is a huge loss to this bullpen. And to still be able to preserve these wins, and I'm with you, I don't think Stanek has looked great necessarily, but they're getting the job done. And right now, I'm kind of with the bullpen, even though it's looked good. It's a no picture on the scorecard type thing. Like Stanek, I don't care what his numbers are. Just get outs. If that means 17 walks and 2 strikeouts on the year, don't really care. When Brash and Santos are back, we can figure that out. For right now, just get outs.
Yeah, just get outs, which they've done pretty well.
Yeah.
They have actually honestly exceeded expectations. And when they were going through that really tough stretch where they were just losing series, the bullpen, in my opinion, was actually the strength of the team, considering how shorthanded it was, because the offense wasn't really doing much. And the starting pitching was even getting shelled at some points. Like we saw Castillo and George Kirby, arguably the two best pitchers, supposed to be the two best pitchers in the Mariners rotation. And now it seems to be Logan and Bryce Miller. So it's like, it seems like this season has been like the year of flip-flopping. Everything's kind of traded places. Like we were expecting Castillo and Kirby to be the guys, and we were expecting Logan to be, well, just Logan, and Bryce Miller to still go through growing pains. But now it's the complete opposite.
Yeah.
And then the offense.
That's
yeah.
I was say that's kind of been what's so funny is like, that's what I was kind of joking earlier. Like coming to season, like, what's your biggest concern? Well, the third base platoon, I'm not too sure about. They've been fine. You know what I mean? Like the only thing that would turn it really upside down is if Sebi Zavala was crushing the ball or something. Like that would be
if Sebi Zavala was batting at least 100, maybe the Mariners would lead the division. They actually might even just one hit, or if he just got a walker, if he just stepped into it, the Mariners might be leading the division.
Roger Dorn. It's funny because people keep bringing up Tom Murphy's off to a really slow start with the Giants, and people keep kind of mentioning that on Twitter. It's like, Murphy's got a hit, though. That's more than Zavala could say.
Who are all these fans saying all of this? They say all these like justification things like, hey, well, at least Tom Murphy sucks. Yeah, but one, he's in a completely different environment, San Francisco.
And
doesn't really know anybody there. And in Seattle, it seemed to be more a fit. Like, look at Mitch Haniger. When he was in San Francisco, it just didn't feel right. And then when he came back to Seattle, it almost felt like he never left.
Oh, there's another positive, Mitch Haniger. I mean,
that's what, I would have said that too, because
almost forgot about it.
I'll just say Mitch Haniger because before the season started, we were concerned about the health and how it's going to turn out. And although that he's been seeing quite a bit of right field action more than what I would like to, his health has actually been holding up pretty well. And he I think he is still on his hitting streak right now. Let me see if he got a hit. He is still maintaining a hitting streak, batting .292, batting .370. He has easily been, as I would like to say, he's been the best player on the Mariners so far on the offensive side. And I know there was that one time where he completely just goofed it up on defense, and we just happened to be there seeing it. And I remember you were like, man, it's just as soon as we said Mitch Haniger was more fundamentally sound. But aside from that, it feels more natural that he's on this team than Teoscar Hernandez. And I know those fans are going to be like, well, Teoscar is leading major leagues with 5 home runs. I'm like, yeah, but if he was in Seattle, I think it'd be the same situation, honestly. Like, and I know that we all miss Kelnick. We all miss Suarez. We all miss Teoscar, or some miss Teoscar. I personally don't, because I didn't like his defense. But if we were in Seattle, I still think we would be 9-10, maybe 10-9 if we had those players still on this team, because there would still be that huge strikeout problem, because whatever Atlanta and the Dodgers, and I guess even Arizona does with their coaching, it's a lot different than how they do it in Seattle. That's why I think that it would be dishonest to say, well, if we just plug all those guys in, it'd be like 2001 start. It's like, no, I think it would be maybe a 1-game difference.
Yeah, I mean, was Teo terrible last year? No, but I'm with you. The defense was tough. And I just don't think it's a ballpark that's built for a guy like Teoscar Hernandez. Mitch Haniger is much more just, I think, a consistent when he's healthy. And that was, like you said, that was kind of concern. Like, we know Mitch Haniger can hit, but he hasn't been healthy in 3 years. Is Mitch Haniger close to the end? Maybe, like, is it just the body can't hold up anymore? And so far, it has. And I like that they've DH'd him a few times too. Get him a day off when you can occasionally, just to help preserve his health. You do have better depth this year. It stinks now with Canzone being out for a little bit, but yeah, with those guys leaving, listen, Rojas and Urias, I think if you look at the WRC plus, have actually outperformed Gino this year. Kelenick's off to a really nice start, but he is running like a 680 BABIP or something. So he's probably getting a little lucky with some of the hits. Still not quite showing the power. Now, he's been more productive than Luke Raley has been, so it probably would be an upgrade. But unfortunately, with this ownership group, it wasn't. Then, fine, keep Kelenic. You don't make the Raley trade, but you're probably not getting Mitch Garver. You're probably not being able to take on Mitch Haniger's So that's the other part with, Stanton and company is just, they've got to make 13 moves to make one, unfortunately. But, it is what it is. Mitch Haniger's been a huge positive so far.
He really has been. And I think we should probably get into the stuff that we're concerned about, because now we're at the 40 minutes. So let's spend like the next 10 minutes talking about like things that we should be concerned now. I'll go first. Julio Rodriguez. I think that's the easy one, where let's take a look at his numbers. At least right now, he's batting .219. So at least he's finally in the 200 batting average. He's been hitting a lot better. Maybe that, I guess, that day off, that his mental health day, which I thought was cringe when Scott Serra was like, oh yeah, it's a mental health thing. I think he should have just said, no, he's just getting a day off because he just needs a day off. I think he overdid that explanation. I would have not explained it that way, but I'm taking a look at Julio's before he stepped up in Cincinnati, against Cincinnati. He was batting 186, 5 RBIs, 21 strikeouts, 3 walks, 1 extra base hit, a double. That's what Julio was throughout that time, and that's where I was very concerned. And now, since the Cincinnati series has been, he was batting around the 300s this time with a 400 OBP. He hasn't struck out insanely as much, but when we saw Julio throughout time, and there were some situations where we may have seen, and luckily I'm able to say that because my eyes were literally glued to the game for 9 games in a row. There were times I'm like, dude, Julio, the guy's at third base, just tap it in. But you saw it where when he was trying to swing, he looked like he just wanted to hit the ball all the way to the moon. And us fans and even people in the comments were like, Julio, just tap it in. You're good. Don't hit home runs. He strikes out, check swings, and so that's what I'm worried about. But hey, if it makes anyone feel better, he never does this well in April. April, he always has that struggling month. So maybe this next part of the series against Colorado, maybe he'll pick it up. Now, granted, he's not going to be hitting much home runs there because Colorado's a difficult place to hit home runs, if I'm correct, because that stadium is just odd. But if it's a bad team against Colorado, then maybe this will be his opportunity to take it even further. But hopefully, Julio can figure it out, and I'm sure he will. But man, if he was hitting 200 before the Cincinnati series, I really do think the Mariners would easily be leading the division. So Julio's my concern, and I'll just throw in that JP Crawford is also my concern because he's supposed to be that leadoff guy. He's not really doing much at all, which is making me nervous because now, granted, he did do a lot better in the Red series. Like, he took a few more pitches to strike out at least. But man, 171 with a 266 OBP, which is why I think he took that day off today, because I don't think he even played today. Without those 2 home runs, it would look like Colton Wong level if you don't even have those 2 home runs in there. So those are my concerns of Julio and JP. Now, any concerns you've got for the Mariners?
I think I saw Riley's comment. I think you got to reverse. Colorado is a hitter's park unless they change some. I know it's a big dimension park, but with the air out there, I actually think it's a pretty good home run. I know they've done all sorts of weird things with the humidor stuff there, and I haven't followed. The Rockies are like one of the teams I probably know the least about, but I think it actually is.
Oh, well, and I guess,
yeah, I think you got to reverse.
I guess Jeff Cirillo.
Yeah.
Jeff Cirillo would probably be the first one to tell you that. 2002 Jeff Cirillo would be like, yeah, Colorado was better for me.
So not that it matters, but yeah, I think should be a pretty good park unless they've done some weird stuff to it. I don't know. Julio to me is more like it's disappointing, but I'm not worried because it just seems to be the April thing with Julio. There's just too much talent there for me not to like. I think it's just his game. His game leads himself to some streaks like this. He's a free swinger. I've always said like he's going to walk the same way a Vlad Guerrero and a Miguel Cabrera walked. It wasn't that they were super patient hitters. It was just pitchers were afraid to throw them strikes, so they were able to get on base. That's how Julio's going to, and we even see it. Like he does still have walks here and there, and it's because pitchers, are nervous of his bat. And I think Julio's going to be fine. Really happy to see 2 extra base hits today. It was kind of concerning that his last extra base hit was literally his first at bat of the season. So that's a long time to go without some slugging, but I'm not worried about Julio. Just kind of would like to see him start better. I think JP does have some legitimate concerns. Like he's looked good at times. He's hit a couple balls out of the ballpark. His defense has looked better. They're still working the count and everything the way JP does. But I will say, like, last year was kind of a breakout year for JP Crawford. It is possible that, he could regress back a little bit. So I do think there is some, I hate saying like legit concern because that makes it sound really negative. I'm not concerned yet about anybody through 19 games, but I do have some minor worries, I guess would be a better way to put it. Luke Rayleigh's been a little bit of a worry. I mean, he hasn't got super consistent at bats, so it's hard to really dive too much into that because he'd play, then he'd sit for 5 games, play, then sit for 3, and it's hard to get in a groove when you're getting 6 at bats a week. That he's played more consistently. Didn't play great yesterday, but had a nice game on Monday. Showed off the wheels and everything like that. So I'm not concerned yet about anybody 19 games in, unless this team was sitting at like 3-16 or 4-15, then I might start, but they've done enough to stay afloat at 9-10. And, like right now, I think most of these guys are going to come out of the funks. Honestly, a concern of mine, it's going to sound kind of weird. The bullpen is still, until Brash and Santos get back, this team has not played a lot of close ball games. I mean, yesterday was close. Today was close for 7 innings, but I think you know what I mean, right? Like there hasn't been a lot of like 1 run into the 8th, 9th inning and stuff like that. So I do have a little bit of concern, even like Colorado, Hitters Park, they're up 4-3 in the 8th. You get nervous without Brash and Santos in there. So I am worried that until those guys get back, there's going to be a couple games that this team loses with the bullpen, but the guys have looked good in there. So like I said earlier, like they've done a good job. I just don't fully trust them yet. So it's kind of it's almost like the opposite. Like they've looked really good, but I don't have that faith in all those guys quite yet.
Well, you know what my stance is going to be? It's going to be how Scott Service uses the bullpen, like, because I'm the one guy, I know I'm probably the one guy out of everyone except Steve. Steve and I are on the same page because we both think the boomer or the Gen X kind of baseball ways, because I grew up into the time when Gen X was pretty much in that perfect age to watch 80s to 90s baseball. Got a lot of it from my father pretty much. But I mean, I think even if Service had Brash and Santos, I still think that we still would see those decisions where it may have led to where we would say the talent doesn't really matter. Which one thing that bothers me, I don't like it when like fans in the media going, well, Munoz just didn't perform or Stanek just didn't perform. And I'm the one guy goes, well, Service could have used anyone else in the bullpen, especially when it goes for that analytics narrative where it would have made more sense to put in a lefty against a lefty, but he still puts in like Munoz in a super high leverage situation, especially when the game is tied. And I think the thing I've noticed, like if it's a setup situation, I think Munoz tends to do better in high leverage when they're leading. When they're tied, you see a little bit of a different Munoz where he does lose the strike zone, just like Stanek does. But when you see Munoz actually with a lead, or maybe where the Mariners are losing so bad doesn't matter, he actually does pitch lights out where we do see 2 or 3 strikeouts in that inning. So, but yeah, you're not wrong completely that this bullpen cannot really sustain itself without Brash and Santos for the rest of the season. But considering how they've been doing, like at least they haven't completely been a disaster.
Right.
And there were games where they were like not winning. At least they didn't like put themselves in a position where they put the game out of reach. And that at that point, that was still where you say, well, the offense has got to score because, man, I was really defending that offense to the core last year. But now this year, it's really easy to just pick and say, no, this offense is terrible. Like, numbers really back it up. But I think that's all we got for the bad parts. I mean, we can only do bads, but we can just go as far as like, I don't know, like we can just say that Ty France has been maybe dipping just a little bit ever since the Chicago series, I guess. But aside from that, I mean, that's all with the bads that we got. Now we're going to go forward into the Colorado series. And I looked at the schedule for everyone, and I think this is a very opportunistic series because you've got Emerson Hancock, where aside from the Milwaukee game, he's actually been doing pretty good. Like the Chicago game, I thought he pitched very well. Cleveland, he pitched better than what the numbers said. I think that Milwaukee game, I think it was just lost from the very beginning. Like it was just a bad series. Like it just wasn't their series. And we've seen those games where when the Mariners lose, you can just tell like, yeah, it just wasn't their game. Like even when they lost that last game against Cleveland, it was like, it just really didn't seem like their game, especially when you have Polanco and Crawford crashing into each other. That's when you know that it just wasn't the game. And before everyone's in the panic, there was still a part of me was like, well, at least we haven't really been playing the easiest teams. We've still played teams that are competitive. Like no matter how bad Boston may be or whatever, however they're doing, they still play competitive baseball. And then Cleveland plays well early on, at least when Bieber was around. Milwaukee is Milwaukee. They're still going to be a good team. And don't forget Chicago. And the other thing I can say is considering how bad that series was, Chicago still didn't look that great. Like their offense was still handled. Like the only player that really killed us was a rookie, but like Bellinger, he was handled very well. I think he only got like one hit in that series. So at least the Mariners themselves, for the most part, have been at least somewhat competitive, at least against like Chicago. But yeah, talking about the series, especially when they're going up against a team that's pretty much tanking at this point, you would think that that would be an opportunity where you have Emerson Hancock. Hopefully we get the good Luis Castillo, like actual La Piedra, not Luis Castillo, like September Luis Castillo. That's what we don't want. And that you got Logan Gilbert. Like, I think it's a great opportunity for a sweep, and they should sweep. So not only just sweeping is good, and you can pick up on the division, but also to make up for all those series losses as well. So you can, so since the Mariners won those two series, they won the Reds, that pretty much makes up for losing to Chicago and Toronto. Now they can make up for Milwaukee and the Cleveland series if they get that sweep. And I looked up the schedule for the rest of the league. We've got Oakland. Let me see what Oakland's up to. Oakland's going to be at Cleveland, and then Cleveland, I'm pretty sure, can handle Oakland, despite how okay their start has been. Houston's been struggling, but maybe that will be their opportunity, especially with Verlander back. Maybe they'll get back on track, but who knows what they'll do against Washington. Maybe their bullpen's so bad it won't even matter. And then Texas, they're playing at Atlanta, so I think this series is a great opportunity for the Mariners to take that division lead. And hopefully they will take advantage of a team that is only 4-15, doesn't even have 5 wins throughout the entire stretch yet. And us Mariner fans are saying, oh, we're doomed, at least when we were like 6-10. But the way I saw it, even though it was as bad as it was, I said it's a miracle that the Mariners are 6-10, considering that most of those wins before Cincinnati, most of those wins were like right at the skin of their teeth. So that's my take on Colorado series. I think it's going to be the best opportunity, at least for this month, to really pick up ground before they go into Texas and host Arizona and Atlanta.
Yeah, I mean, Colorado's awful. I mean, I don't mean that maliciously to any Rockies fans. I've sat through plenty of awful Mariners teams in my life, so, you know, it's not a personal thing. I don't think any Rockies fans are going to defend that team either. They're not good. Listen, every team gets their wins, so it's not like the Mariners are just guaranteed to go in there and sweep. I'd be fine taking 2 out of 3. There's always something weird that can happen. Every team's got players that can, you know, produce for them. I don't know the Rockies roster all that well. I know you got Nolan Jones, Chris Bryant just went on the injured list. I think Kyle Freeland's going to be out for that series. So definitely an opportunity, though, for the Mariners. This is definitely the worst team they're going to face this season, or at least up to this point this season. So definitely a series you want to win. I mean, again, I never call for sweeps just because that's hard to do. It's not super common, but it's definitely a series you want to win 2 out of 3 because it's just it's a bad baseball team. And it's a chance for this team to get to 500 and maybe even get over the 500 mark. And like I said, Texas has got the Braves coming into town. Tough series for them. Houston is reeling right now, and they're banged up. I believe in that team. I think they're very talented. I do not certainly don't expect them to fish below Oakland by any means, but they're battling it right now. They have a lot of injuries going on there in Houston. So, and they've dug themselves a pretty decent. Are they 6-15? I think.
Let me take a look. And
that's
also you also got to consider that Dusty Baker 6-14 and with a negative 23 run differential. And also got to consider the fact that their fearless leader, Dusty Baker, isn't the manager either. So I think that also plays a role that because Dusty Baker, as much as he was okay at best in the playoffs, did get a World Series. He was like almost a shoe-in to get you to the playoffs kind of manager. So without the leader, and as much as fans hate Houston and Seattle, I still give Dusty Baker a hell of a lot of credit because he ran into a situation where the Houston Astros were pretty much, they were in that whole cheating baggage, and somehow Dusty Baker got them all focused and into that winning culture again. And now without Dusty Baker, it's unclear where they're going to go. But aside from that, Mariners got to take care of business, and hopefully they can do so against Colorado, and hopefully Castillo we can see the La Piedra Castillo. George Kirby will have a much better game this time than what we're used to. And then don't forget Logan Gilbert. So this is I think this is easily the best opportunity for the Mariners to at least have us look in the standings where we can say Mariners are finally number 1 in this season at least. So I think that's going to do it for everything of the agenda. Now let's go over all the comments that we got from our fans. And fans out there, put out any comments or questions because you guys got about less than 5 minutes until we end this show because I got to take a walk around the neighborhood because the weather is still gorgeous outside and it's still bright. Let's take a look and see what we've got. Yep, you were right. Balls flying Colorado. I mean, Todd Helton and Larry Walker would agree otherwise, and Jeff Cirillo. The Atlanta Braves series is a true test for this team. Couldn't agree more. Looking forward to it. Also, the Rangers, not expecting them to fold. Absolutely. As bad as they're doing, I would expect those series to be tough, and hopefully, hey, if the Mariners can take 2 of 3 on both those series, I will take that as much as a sweep. Astros look like the Yankees and Red Sox of last year. Huge payroll, gonna live in the cellar. Yeah, I guess so. Any news on Brian Wu? I haven't really heard anything about Brian Wu lately. I mean, if there was any updates, anything, we haven't really heard much of Brian Wu. I think it's just.
I think he was supposed to go on a rehab assignment here fairly soon, next week or something. I think don't know if it was Justin Hollander who was saying that Brash and Wu are kind of on the same timetable. So I'm thinking maybe early May would be my guess.
As of April 12th from Shannon Dreyer, they said that Brian is another up and down life BP. After that, could be sent out for a 3-inning rehab. And usually when they do those rehabs, they usually play, I would think they usually play in Everett. Okay, got it. Gotcha. I just looked at your chat. But yeah.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. No worries.
But yeah, Brian Wu, I think if you want to go to a minor league baseball game, go to Everett, or maybe he does it in Tacoma, because usually when there's rehabs, I think they usually do it. I think he's going to do it in Everett because Everett is that's basically when it's a little bit easier to get yourself going and get in that rhythm. I think he would play in Everett that's all I got on the Brian Wu. And I don't mean to sound too negative, but also Colt Emerson is on the IL due to an injury. And I remember when I was looking at the stats, I was like, wait, where's Colt Emerson? And I was looking up everything on Twitter. I was like, wait, where's Colt Emerson? And then someone replied me like, oh, he's injured. The Modesto Nuts and the Mariners, they really kept that under the rug. It seemed like it was like an I don't know kind of situation. So, I mean, I know it's minor league baseball, but it is something I still have an attachment with. So, hopefully, everyone's going to be healthy, especially Brian Wu, Matt Brash, and Santos, so the Mariners can compete for not only division but hopefully the World Series. But that's going to do it for the both of us. Trident, I appreciate your presence here as always.
Boy.
And let's hope we can do like a play-by-play game together because Steve, I love you. I love your color commentating. It like blends in so perfectly with my play-by-play, but I want Trident to be part of this party as well because it's fun when he's there as well. It's fun. And I want to see him throwing a hat out of frustration again.
It'll happen. It'll happen. It's
It
already
will.
happened just off screen.
I mean, look at me. I was already swearing on my show on the Ty France double play and the Luke Rayleigh that I had to censor it out because I didn't want to make myself look like a completely angry person. At least I wanted to make it funny.
Back.
Mariners baseball is back. But that's going to do it. And one last request I have for you guys. Use his promo code JS Trident for $20 off, especially if you want to save $20 to say hello to Eugenio Suarez, or if you want to boo Jared Kelnick. But I'm going to be the one cheering for him. But that's going to do it for us. Thank you for being here. Hit the like button, subscribe for the both of us, and have a great night, and go Mariners.